this video is going to be about Step Tracker FRQ, a publicly available FRQ, and hopefully I'm going to help you run through. Now this is a FRQ which gets you to make a full class. So we're going to run through making a class from beginning to the end, and let's proceed. Okay, let's look at the question first. This is really a kind of a simple FRQ which is asking us to look at a class which is kind of keeping track of people's steps, I think. It's a fitness tracking system. Okay, a step tracker object is created with a parameter that defines the minimum number of steps that must be taken for a day to be considered active. Okay, so let's take a look down here. We can see that we have a bunch of different, we got to make a constructor, obviously, and we'll have some methods. Add daily steps, active days, average steps, and, well, you know what? I'm just going to grab those and copy them because I might need them later. Okay, and here's a table with some examples, right? So here is the goal of we have to make this many steps. And we have active days, average steps, that kind of stuff. So really, we just have to make a bunch of, just a bunch of methods here. Let's go and see exactly. Okay, so let's call this parameter minimum number of steps, so we'll call min steps. How about that? Okay, so let's give me some ideas. Let's go to our code window and try and put this together. So I grabbed this, I grabbed this code, right? So let me try and, slide that across a little bit. Okay, so I grabbed the code that I was looking for here, and I'm going to just make my window a bit bigger. That's it. All right, so I grabbed this from the question, these methods here, just so I can write it in and remember what it is. Okay, and let's comment that out. So it does sort of help. I know that you won't do this in your exam, but I'm just putting it here for you to see as I'm doing it. These are my methods. Okay, so remember, when we do our class, okay, there are three parts. We have the instance variables, which define the data. And I think we know, as we talked about before, that was, well, they're usually going to be private. Okay, so usually make your variables private. There'll be a point for that. Private int, it's going to be an int which tracks the number, and it was called min steps. I think we decided was a good name. All right, the next part of a class is the constructor, which takes the input or sets up the variables. Right, it sets up the object. So what we're going to do here is define the constructor, and that will be the same name. So public step tracker, same name as the class. And we're taking int and I guess steps, right, which is the number of steps that is defined as being the minimum number of steps. Okay, as we see from the question here. Okay, so all we got to do is take save that steps into min steps. Alrighty, so then the third part is methods, and that's what we've been doing here, is defining the methods that we got to write. And I'm just sorting out these methods one by one, make it a little bit clearer for me. So return that. And I think once we have that, it should be a little bit easier to write. Okay. All right, so here we are with the methods we need to write. Okay. So let's look at add daily steps. Accumulates information about steps in readings taken once per day. So let's see how it's used. Okay. So here we are. Here we have active days. Okay. There's average steps, which is really about the steps per day, I would imagine. Seems to be returning a double. Okay. So that's something to note here. Average steps. So I think I'm almost ready to write my method here. Public double average steps. All right, I've got a clue here. Takes no input, but it does return a double. So I've noticed that from the question here. Okay, active days returns an integer. Doesn't take an input. So let's go here and write public int active days. Okay, so now we've got our signature for two of our methods here. So that's good. We've got kind of signatures in here. The next thing we need to do is to try and get a kind of a signature for add daily steps. Okay, so add daily steps seems to take an integer here. Okay, and this is the it's not returning any value. It's just taking an input and saving that. Okay, so let's go ahead and then take add daily steps, which is going to be public void because not giving any output, and then add daily steps, and we're going to take int, which we can call steps. Okay, use a local variable for the input. This is how many steps. All right. So, what are we returning when we say active days? So here it says we have days, right? So here's, let's say we have 1 day, and here is an inactive day, right? So now we've had technically 1 day, and then 2 days, but not active. And so it's saying here active days is still 0. So I think we'll need to keep track of active days. Private int active days. Seems like that's going to be something we'll need to track here. Okay, so active days is going to be returning, seems to be return active days. That seems to be what active days is doing. It's returning this number, but we have to update that number. So let's see what happens here. Now this is average steps. This is saying 7,000. Is that because we've taken the previous numbers, which is 14,000, and we've got 2 days that we've entered times 4. So we need to have, I think, save the number of days. And then we need to, I think we need to save the total steps. So see how the data is kind of growing for what we're doing, but when we do daily steps, add daily steps here, we're actually going to be updating our total steps. Okay, so I would say that total steps plus equals steps. Now, once we do that, this is being added per day, right? So we need to add 1 to days as well. So days, we get plus 1 more day, and we need to track if it's an active day. We need to update this. Now, what defines an active day? Well, An active day is when it has at least this many steps, or however we've set to the minimum steps. So we need a condition in here. If steps is greater than or equal to min steps, then we can record this as an active day. And then we can add to the active days. Right, so we're updating this value here. So now we have data coming in, recording the steps and recording the days. And so this is now getting closer to what we need to return. I think the only thing we're going to do now is update average steps. So average steps is going to be this calculation here where we're taking the average number of steps per day. Okay. Average number of steps per day. Okay. So we take total steps divided by days. But we need to convert this to a double. So we return and we'll cast it to a double, total steps, and divide by days. The double, we need the double because if we divide, we're going to divide an int by an int. It's going to leave an int. We're going to lose the decimal place. So what we need to do is make sure that we are saving it as a double and converting it to a double before. So it's going to convert total steps to a double, and then it's going to divide by days so that we have double space to save the result in. Okay, and so that seems to be the total class. I think if I just go and check here, we've got an active day there, yeah, so that would work in here, add daily steps, active days plus plus. Okay. Average steps, active days, so that's it. Okay. So as you see, it's not terribly complicated. It's really, when we're writing these classes, what we're doing is we are basically having some data. We're having a way to construct our object, and then we're writing some methods to act on that data or save the data or manipulate the data. Right, now there is one thing that I've forgotten to do, and maybe you've noticed this. When I begin my object, when I sort of run my constructor, none of these are getting set, right? So I haven't initialized any of these variables. I went and added them later, but at the beginning, I've set steps to min steps, but I haven't initialized these variables. So what I should do is, before I finish, I should set my active days to 0. I should set my days to 0, and I should set my total steps to 0. This will initialize them and set them to 0 to start with, and get them assigned to a memory space, right? At the moment, when I have them up here, they're not assigned any memory, so I need to go and do that to initialize them. Other than that, I think we're fine. Let's go and check, make sure that was all we need to do. We don't need any empty constructor, empty input. We need to have, okay, so it doesn't ask us to make an empty constructor, right? So we are assuming that it will be used with one constructor here. Okay, yep, and that would be enough, I think. Okay, so hope that was helpful. We took about, we took about 14 minutes to answer that, so that we were well within the time of about 20 to answer that, so pretty happy with that. Okay, so that's it. Hope that was helpful.